My conversation with Dr. Irith today. Dr. Irith is a nephrologist, an engineer, and an entrepreneur, and an educator who is passionate about creating positive change through human-centered care. And I think that is so beautiful. As a patient myself, I was very drawn by her message. And I think it's very interesting to see, and we're going to hear about her story, that whilst working as a chief medical resident at the Jewish General Hospital in Montreal, she started understanding that the challenges that the healthcare professionals face in connection with when connecting with patients, which I can talk about it myself as a patient, and I think we're going to have a great discussion about that today. So thank you so much, Dr. Irith, for being here. And of course, Dr. Irith, I really want to say this because I think her mission is very important. She's the founder of Yagrumo, which is a nonprofit, and she's going to talk more about it with the objective to spark positive change through human-centered communication for the healthcare system. Hi, Dr. Irith, how are you?
Good, how are you? Thank you for inviting me, Angelica.
Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for being patient with a little bit of our technical problems. It's always kind of the way, but as I said, the most important is that we share our message here and some really good takeaways for our listeners, which I can see that you are so passionate about your mission, and I think that it's revolutionary, and the title is talking about the human-centered revolution. I think it's an important subject that we need to focus on now and in the future. So tell us a little bit more about when you were working as a chief medical officer and how you started kind of feeling that there was some challenges around the communication between the health professionals and the patients.
So I was senior at the time, a chief medical resident, like I said, at the Jewish. And early on in our training, we have a different type of role as students and as junior physicians, junior residents, is that we go in, we collect data, we put the data together, we ask the questions, we examine the patients. We're there to solve a problem, almost a paper problem, to put things on paper, to come up with a diagnosis, and then to come up with treatment plans. So we're so caught in that cycle of just looking for the information, gathering the information, putting it together, making sense of the information, that we don't, I think that much of the time we don't question really the entirety of what we're doing. So when I was chief medical resident, I had a different type of look at the situation, in the sense that here I was able to pull back and have a panoramic view. Panoramic view in the sense that I was in charge of the medical residents, in charge of the students. I was able to watch interactions between students, amongst themselves, with the residents, between the residents and the staff. So you get this, like you're in a laboratory of interactions, and you're watching these interactions, and they lead you naturally towards the relationship between patients and healthcare providers. And at that point in time, it occurred to me that we're so caught up with the science, we're so focused on the science, that care has become very transactional. We're there to collect data, we're there to solve a problem, we're there to move on, but we're not looking holistically at the entire patient. So it was that panoramic view, that look at the entire system and all the interactions that are taking place within the healthcare system, that drew me back into the patient-provider encounter.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, it's interesting you say about the studies. I mean, I can imagine that the studies are so challenging, right? Like, because it's, people talk about, it's just literally, I haven't got time to eat, I have to just, be focused on the studies like 12 hours a day, and then, go into the hospital and do all the practice and everything. So how much time do you actually spend in kind of understanding a little bit more about the psychology or the or whatever the theory about the interaction between you as a doctor and the patient? Do you actually have like a subject that you study for during the whole 5 years that you're studying to be a doctor? Or it is a bit like nutrition. People say, oh, doctors don't study about nutrition. Is that a specific subject that talk about it, like you're going to be dealing with human beings, it's not just looking for.
Oh, I lost you, Angelica. I don't know if you could hear me, but it looks like you're frozen. Can you hear me, Angelica? Oh, there you go. You're frozen for a second. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, okay. I can hear you. Yeah.
I think I got it just for what you were saying. Interestingly enough, you would imagine that considering how important it is to be able to communicate with people, that we'd be spending more time communicating with people and learning how to communicate, but it takes up such a small space in our medical curricula.
Yeah.
And there are many reasons why that could be, and there are so many different hypotheses that have been thrown around. It's unclear. It's hard to point your finger specifically at why that is. But I can tell you that over the past 20 years, very little has changed. So we talk about holistic care. We talk about communication with patients, but in our training, we get very, very little exposure to that. And unless you're in the trenches with people that you could model with master communicators who are so invested in communication, you're going to go on through a large part of your training not tapping into the power of communication.
Yeah. I totally saw that in my treatments, throughout dealing with different health professionals, and how big of a difference it makes when somebody knows how to communicate with you. When I had my emergency surgery for my stage 3 bowel cancer, all the doctors that I saw beforehand, the surgeons, the gastroenterologists, they were all, I could see that they were scared to operate me. I could see that they were fearful for my future. I could feel that, it was quite of a complex, situation, because it needed to be an emergency surgery and all of that. And the surgeon that operated me, I didn't even see him until afterwards. And when he came in, he was at a completely different level than everybody else. And just the words that he chose to tell me at the beginning, he said, the operation went really well. I had a really good look at your organs. Everything went well. He started he was so positive, and I was like, okay. And he said, but has anybody told you what we found? And I said, no. And he said, we found a tumor. And, it makes such a difference for somebody who's just finding out that, Thursday I was healthy and now I have a stage 3 bowel cancer. Just that change in word, he said to me, I have a tumor. He didn't straight away say, you have cancer.
Right.
And in that little bit, it just kind of eased me into, I was like, okay, is there any chance the tumor is benign? And he said, unfortunately, it's not. And it's probably stage 3, and you're probably going to need chemotherapy. But, I never forget how he gave me certainty that whatever he did inside me, it was excellent. It was good. And he said, you're going to, I said, but how can I, recover from this surgery now? In 1 month, I need to do chemotherapy. He said, a lot of people do. You're going to be okay. He kind of really grounded me, like, okay, well, this is it, this is the beginning, but I had a good start.
Sure.
And everybody else around me, the communication was just terrible. It was like, oh my God, the surgery is going to be really dangerous. And, everything was just so, the language was so dramatic, negative, and it was hard.
Of course.
Until I met him. And like you're saying, it's either he's being modeled by, he modeled somebody, and he got to that stage because he was older than all the others, but it just came with some sort of wisdom that I think it's challenging to teach in a curriculum, right? But at the same time, I think it would be really important. When I think about my experience with the oncologists, it was just pretty terrible, I must say. Their bedside manner was very non-human centered. It was just pretty much, ticking boxes, do you feel this, do you feel that? And that's it, just go and have your chemo, you almost die, okay, you can have chemo, next, it's it wasn't very, I didn't feel like a human being. I felt like I was in this conveyor belt going from one procedure to another because there were so many procedures. And I think that as a patient, you need to have an enormous amount of strength in yourself to go through that mentally. And not many people have that. If I had yeah, go on.
No, that's really interesting, Angelica, that you went through a whole spectrum of experiences in healthcare at a time where you really needed reassurance and hope, right? You needed certainty. You mentioned the word certainty. You needed reassurance. You needed hope. You needed somebody who was very conscientious about the language that they were using. And I've never heard the word wisdom in that context, but I see where you're coming from. It's that wisdom, the ability to deal with whatever you have, whatever life experiences, whatever experiences you have in your career, whatever insights you've accumulated over the course of time, and just exercise wisdom at that moment in time. It's interesting.
Yeah. And so from that, looking at the residents and the healthcare professionals and patients, so what did you do from that point on to start, getting you and in a different journey of really advocate for this holistic care?
I think that I myself always exercise that type of patient-centered care because it comes pretty naturally to me. I'm somebody who is very curious about people, and I love to learn about people, and I love to connect. I kick out of connecting with people. So it came naturally to me, but I think that it was at that moment in time I was more cognizant of how it may come naturally to some, but these people are probably more the exception than the rule because I was also a more mature student, had some background, some studies that I'd done before. This is something that also, like you said, the wisdom, the life experience that makes me more at ease and more comfortable to be able to deal with patients in a holistic way, to deal with the uncertainty, to deal with the emotions, etc. So I came at it from maybe a different angle. And I just continued just naturally doing this, trying to connect with patients, see beyond the illness, see beyond the disease, see beyond the symptoms, see them as part of a greater community, their family, etc., their work, their hobbies, their passions, their dreams, their worries. These human beings, right? They're doing the same things and they're looking forward to the same things as the rest of us are. I've been involved in education, so I take every opportunity to look at that and to do this on the spot, not just in theory, but to show this type of ability to relate to patients, to my students as we do rounds and as we're discussing patients, etc. So this mission that I took to exercise it myself, to practice it, and to inspire other people to do the same, even though we have very little exposure to it in our training.
Yeah. And I think when you think about, from the training, you probably get into this rhythm of, just seeing patients for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It's like you don't have much time to exercise that because it becomes this, thing that is just always rushing, right? Like, so at what point do you think that, the training's part of it, but how do you see health professionals actually being able to exercise that in a world that, chronic diseases are like, crazy increasing, right? Like it's all of doctors are completely up to here with their workload. How do you see that them being able to exercise this, right? I've got, for example, my GP, she's amazing, but sometimes she calls me at 8:30 at night and I'm like, why are you doing this? You need to look after yourself too. Like it's insane. I mean, I know she's so passionate about it, but she goes above and beyond. But I also understand she can't keep doing that, like for her own health, right? Like how do you see people finding that balance? Because there is so much pressure on health professionals these days.
I'm going to say something a little unconventional and unpopular, Angelica, but I think as stretched out and as overwhelmed as we are, I think it's an issue of time management. I mean, you looked at a video on our website. The video is a short video of somebody who's able to profoundly, in a very deep level, connect with a patient in less than 4 minutes.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story that happened to me quite a while back, just to give you context of this whole time issue. So when I was working in the hospital, I'm a kidney specialist. I was lending my office to one of the dietitians who had a very small office to see the transplant patients in, and she was struggling to work in this office. And I said to her, listen, I'm not here once a week. I'm going to lend you my office. You see your patients there. So one day I knock on the door. I'm coming in. I just want to put my stuff in the office. And there's this patient who's sitting there, a patient who had been on dialysis, who had been transplanted while I was on maternity leave. And I'd known her because I was caring for her for a period of time. So she turned around, she started having a conversation with me, and she saw me, how's your baby? You were pregnant, you know, how are you doing? What's been going on? I hadn't seen her in about a year.
Yeah.
I left the room. The conversation lasted maybe a matter of about 3 to 5 minutes. I came back hours later as the dietitian was wrapping up, and she looked at me and she said, what happened? And I said to her, well, what do you mean what happened? She goes, how is it you walked into this room and you were able to have such a beautiful conversation with this patient? She said I was not able to connect with her. I was trying to go through all of these elements. I had to talk to her about the phosphorus and the potassium and the blood pressure. We were going through all of these things, and she seemed completely unmotivated and disengaged. She walked into the room and her demeanor changed. So I asked her a question that struck her, and I think she thought that I was like losing my mind at the time. And I said, did you notice what she was wearing? And she said, well, what does that have anything to do with the conversation we're having? I said, look, did you actually notice the jacket that she was wearing? She said, no. But you walked her into the office from the waiting room. She said, yes. Well, she was wearing this really cool Harley-Davidson jacket. She looked at me and said, well, she was wearing a Harley-Davidson jacket. So I said, you always talk to me about the trips that you have. You love to take these beautiful road trips. You love to go to the United States, to Cape Cod and the surrounding area. You know what it's like to travel. When you saw that jacket on this woman, you could just imagine her being on the Harley Davidson, or at some point in time she's somebody who probably enjoys traveling, who enjoys beautiful scenery. That was your opportunity to connect with this patient. And you know what?
Yeah.
The phosphorus and the blood pressure could have waited. You could have focused just entirely on just using this opportunity to find something that you were both passionate about. Now, this is my imagination. Maybe I'm wrong, but the likelihood that I was probably close to being right is pretty high. So connection can happen in very short periods of time. You know, a word, a smile, or body posture, touching your hand. You don't need to be investing the entire time in trying hard to connect with patients spontaneously. And some things we need to hold off on some things in order to be able to focus on that. We need to choose.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. Yeah, and I think that it's so easy for you to get caught up in the business of your mind, isn't it? And trying to force something as opposed to just being a human being and just connecting to another human being. And I think that example is just beautiful. I can imagine myself traveling around American holidays. So would you say, of course, you know, like what you said is quite unconventional in the sense like the time management, I think it's, you know, you're saying is a big thing. What are the education, you know, being, you know, having this as part of the educational part of the training would be, you know, also useful so people could have more an understanding, you know, especially for the people that don't have that natural ability, right? To understand that they can communicate with other people and they can relate to other people, you know, in certain ways. What else would you say is the reason why there is this broken, you know, communication between health professionals and patients?
I think part of the reason is we're under a tremendous amount of pressure. And regardless of whether it's time, it's the workload, it's the frustration, it's very hard to invest in communication when you're not in the right frame of mind. So to me, that's becoming more and more prominent. We're just stretched. The other thing that I would say, it's like my grandmother never liked tomatoes, but she never tasted a tomato. So it's kind of weird. She would say, I hate tomatoes, but grandma, did you ever try tomatoes? No. How could you know that you hate tomatoes if you've never tried tomatoes, right? So how do we appreciate the impact of communication if we've never played around with it? We haven't tried it, right? So the moment that you just say, look, I'm going to try it out. I'm going to see what it's like to adopt different ways of communicating, different ways of interacting with patients. The moment that you try this, you get to experience it for yourself, and you get the rewards of connecting with patients. So I would say with very little exposure, there may not be buy-in from a large segment of the healthcare population, but I would go. Sometimes I just ask a question, Angelica, and I say, we went into healthcare for a reason. When you ask residents or you ask students, what did you go into healthcare for?
Yeah.
Because I want to help people. So helping people, you have some kind of impact, right? It's not just sharing knowledge, but you want to walk out of something saying, I've made this person's day happier. They have a greater sense of certainty. They have a greater idea of how we're going to tackle this issue, what this issue may be, that we're partners, that I'm not going to be abandoning my patient, etc. So if we're looking for impact, what we're measuring is not impact. So I would say when we change the mindset and we say, like, we're looking to have impact, so why are we not able to have impact? And what is it going to take for us to be able to have impact on our patients?
Yeah. And I'm probably going to say something that is unconventional as well, or maybe not very popular, but I think we will get on very well because we like the unpopular themes. As somebody who was diagnosed very early on with stage 3 bowel cancer, I understood that turning up to chemo alone wasn't going to save me. I needed to make some changes myself, right? I needed to change my diet, the exercise. There's a lot of research these days that talks about exercise and cancer. I needed to change my relationship with stress, and all of those things. And that, the doctors didn't ask me to do any of that because it wasn't their job. Their job was focusing fully on, we're going to give you the strongest chemo that your body can take. And that's what we're focusing on. That's fine. And I am very grateful for that. But I think that the pressure that you're talking about, and I see an issue, especially in America, where, a lot of people can, you can sue doctors, you can, do all of that. There is a big imbalance between, the responsibility, right? People are going to doctors hoping that the doctors are going to solve all their problems without them doing anything. And of course, you as a doctor would go to school with the vision that I want to help people. And deep inside that just giving them a prescription for statins or for, high blood pressure or for, diabetes, that alone, is not going to solve all the problems. They also need to make some lifestyle changes.
Absolutely.
And so you get caught up in this kind of, you're not fulfilled anymore because you know that they're not open to doing anything. If you say anything, they might get upset with you. It is a real issue, I think. I have volunteered in a hospital in a cancer ward here. When I speak to them, they said, did you change anything? And I'll be like, I changed my diet and I exercise during chemo. And they'll be like, what do you eat now? I said, I eat a plant-based diet. Oh, come on. There must be some common ground thing. You must be. And I was like, hello. I had stage 3 bowel cancer. I am no longer interested in playing, Russian roulette with my health. I'm going to do the best I can every single day because I have 2 kids to raise. But, people just get into this thing like, no, but change is too hard. Give me the pill. And I really think that the idea of treating people holistically is beautiful. I am a health and life coach. I help people that want to change. But a lot of people also are not prepared to take on their 50% responsibility. And I think that's when it gets a bit tricky.
It does. Absolutely. And it's a true partnership. I mean, helping them is also empowering them. Helping them is sometimes putting the mirror in front of their face and showing them what we're actually dealing with. You know, what is their role to be in this partnership? So you can't, you can't enforce things. It's hard to motivate people, but you need to let them, to lead them to their own conclusions so that they themselves motivate themselves.
Yeah. I think that puts an enormous amount of pressure on health professionals, because I used to ask the oncologists all the time, why did you choose oncology? And they would say to me, because I wanted to help people. And I just kind of thought to myself, wow, like I saw people coming in because they would come in at the same days as me for the same treatment. And some days they would come in, 1 week they would be walking, the 2 weeks later they would be on a wheelchair. It's a tough, and the doctors are seeing these every single day. It is not an easy job at all.
Not at all. It's emotionally draining for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So when did you had the idea to start yagrumo? Like, well, how did the whole thing come about?
I talked about it a little bit. I mean, you bumped into me on LinkedIn, right? You must have like post on LinkedIn. I like to write. I like to share.
Yeah.
So a few years ago, I was working in a very toxic environment, and I would have never thought or dreamt or imagined my entire life that I would ever be faced with such a difficult situation. But I was bullied. It took me a while. It was only recently that I started sharing my story kind of more in a public forum, but I was bullied for a number of years. And to the point that I got very sick. At the peak of the bullying, I weighed 90 pounds. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I don't know how I was able to continue to take care of patients, but I was hyper vigilant. I was in a state where I knew that, error could happen, that I needed to really be very, very careful, double checking, triple checking what I was doing. Safe to practice, but I myself was not doing well. I took some time off. But what I came to realize, and this was going on for a period of 5 years. It was only a couple of years ago that I left the hospital I was working at, was that there was one space, one place where I was safe. I was always safe, and that was in the room with my patients. There was no place for the bullies to come there. They couldn't follow me there. Physically, mentally, I made every effort that I could make to leave whatever distractions were at the door, walk into the encounter, and just focus on what I was there to do.
Yes.
What I realized was that this was my fuel. That it didn't matter how bad things were at work. It didn't matter how badly I was humiliated, how badly I was treated, how badly nothing really mattered. I mean, I did have a close group of healthcare professionals that were very supportive. I mean, this happened with a very select number of people, this bullying. But nevertheless, I realized that the people who really saved me were my patients. They cared. I was able to focus on them. I was able to give them, and as a result, this really was my fuel. I was able to see, like, to reap the inner rewards of making a difference in life, even at a stage where you yourself feel so emptied out. It just filled me up.
Fills your cup, yeah.
Filled me up. I was emptied out for other reasons, but they filled me up.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. So from that you started. So of course you left that job
after 5 years. It took me long time. The times you can't. There's some environments that you can't save, right? There's some places where, as much as you would pray and you would hope, and bullying, by the way, is pretty rampant in many industries, and it's very rampant also in the healthcare landscape. We hope that things are going to get better. We hope that the system will change. We hope that some miracle will happen, and much of the time, unfortunately, it doesn't. So I left and I founded yagrumo. I founded yagrumo to be able to. This was a tribute. By the way, it is a for-profit organization, not a non-for-profit.
Oh, non-for-profit. Okay, I'm sorry. It's a for-profit. Okay.
No, it's a for-profit organization. I founded yagrumo with the mission to elevate the patient-provider relationship, to bring healthcare professionals back to the reason why they entered the healthcare profession, to be able to help them to cultivate and nurture that relationship, and to be able to tap into the power of that relationship the way that I tapped into this power myself at the most difficult time of my life.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Wow. Maybe we need to do another talk on the bullying journey. As I think that's so interesting that you went through that. Somebody was telling me the other day that health professionals are normally they get they come across issues not because of patients telling that they did something wrong, but because their colleagues
Oh,
try
really?
to.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
it's more, I know it's more about their colleagues trying to tell them, trying to report them
Really?
as they're not doing the right thing, but that doesn't mean that they are not doing the right thing. It just could be a bullying situation, right?
Absolutely.
So which is I was actually so surprised, because I thought, wow, like that's a big thing to do, especially when you know that it's not true. Just because somebody could lose their license, or stop practicing or whatever. So I think it's really interesting that you stuck around for 5 years. That's a long time as well. That's a long time.
Optimist.
It's
And a lot of things too, right? I don't give up easy,
I
Angelica. I
know.
mean, I don't give up. I have to admit, in hindsight, I wish I would have walked away much sooner, but I think walking away too early would also have been a great regret. So, yeah,
Yeah.
perseverance.
Yeah, no, it is. I think we're all on our journeys, and we make our choices, and the ones that we've done in the past, they're done for a reason, right? So but that really fueled you to start your groom, like you kind of, yeah, which is incredible. So tell us a little bit more about the work that you do at your groom, like around helping other healthcare professionals and also clinics and hospitals, right?
Yeah, so it's a startup. It's a new company. We launched a proof of concept last year. So I mean, you were talking to me just before we went live about the video that you saw on the website. So
Yes,
I'll talk a little bit about the video and how this all came to be.
please.
So we wanted to test the theory of how we're going to teach human-centered care. And so it's all around storytelling. So the way that it works is that we have stories. This was a real life situation. I mean, obviously the names, the actors, et cetera, changed, but through storytelling, through putting healthcare professionals not in a role play situation, but actually to sit in somebody else's seat and observe, really be a neutral observer, feel the emotions, go through the entire array of emotions, and use that to ignite reflection. So we worked with 200 healthcare professionals in Ontario. They were all kidney healthcare professionals, but none physicians. We worked with a group of nurses. We had some social workers, dietitians, and pharmacists on board, all across the spectrum, very young, who had just started out, and some who were very seasoned and had been around for a long time. Um, so the story was that of a patient who is a difficult and a challenging patient, dialysis patient. You see him in different videos. He shows up, he's in the waiting room, he's antsy, you can tell he's really upset, he's getting impatient. Then he gets to the nurse's station, and he has an altercation with the nurses there. He moves on. It turns out that he files a complaint with the ombudsman. You see the group of healthcare professionals meeting in a boardroom discussing his case.
Wow.
And then finally, the last scene, which is a scene that appears on our website, where the same patient with the same situation, with the same dilemma, somebody managed to connect with him at a very deep level. This is more than just a professional encounter. This is somebody who really cares. Like, you see this human connection. And then you unlock the mystery, you kind of crack the code, and you understand what's at the core of his behavior, because he's a typical challenging patient. In other words, a patient that we really couldn't reach deeply to connect with. We call them challenging patients. If only we could just kind of step back, listen, observe with no judgment, and try to just understand the situation, what's going on. So we did that. The whole, the videos, like I said, we shot in
the video is, I just want to say that the video was, so I came across your profile on LinkedIn, and then I went to the website and I watched the video because I want to understand more what was about the agreement. And I was like, okay, what is this about? And I looked and I watched the video and I was like, wow, it made me, feel things. It made me stop and reflect. It made me walk on the patient's foot, like it made me think that we are sometimes we can be so single-minded, thinking like it's this way, but we can't, we can't see the other person's reasons and stories, because we can't see it from their perspective. And sometimes we assume things, and it's nothing that we assume. I mean, there was so many takeaways from that video. It was so powerful that I felt like everybody should watch this video for so many reasons.
We need to let her imagine. Thank you, Angelica. It really was important for me when we wrote the script to ensure that it elicited the greatest amount of feelings. I wanted people to feel, not to be in their mind, to be in their heart, to be able to feel what it was like for the nurse, to be able to feel what it was like for the patient, even during the altercation. What were the emotions that everybody was feeling then? And so as they were going through the videos, everything is around storytelling, gamification, reflection. So what would you do in that situation? If you were the nurse, what would you have done then? You know, what do you think is going through the patient's mind? What do you think the patient's priority is at this point in time? And we captured very granular data because we wanted to understand where they were coming from and whether we would be able to achieve transformation throughout the program. So there's one question that we repeated twice, because I knew that if we got a different answer, depending on the answer that we got, we would know that we've been able to change perspectives. And the question was the following. We said it at the very beginning, you know, once they had enough exposure to the patient, we repeated the same question after they saw this video with Nurse Jackie. How interested is the patient? So it went from at the beginning, when they see kind of this negative facade of this patient, this negative attitude, behavior, challenging and difficult to collaborate with, that he was very disinterested in his care. They really felt that this was a patient, because of his behavior, didn't care about his health at all, which is why he was so belligerent, non-collaborative. But it's the same patient, Angelica, the same patient with the same issues. We just communicate with him differently. We're able to extract different types of information from him. And at the very end, they went from about, I can't remember what the exact numbers were, but certainly less than a quarter who felt that he was interested in his health, to 95% who felt that he was highly interested in his health.
Yeah.
So they understood him there. And the important thing to remember in this situation is that, just imagine as a healthcare professional, how would you behave towards a patient if you felt that they weren't really interested in their health? How much effort?
Yeah, exactly.
This, right?
Yeah.
If you're sitting and you're going through a transformation where within a very short period of time, I mean, this is like the entire program is 2 hours long. If after 2 hours of interaction and observation, you've switched your perspective so dramatically, that's going to affect the way that you interact with this patient, how much effort you put into this relationship.
Yeah, of course.
That's the key you get out of this relationship. And so this is with the proof of concept with the bed. So we did that, and now we're looking at scaling. We spent the last 8 months strategizing, seeing what would be the best way to reach out to the greatest number of medical and nursing personnel, because this is the sector that we're mostly interested in, and especially new trainees.
Yes.
New trainees,
Yeah. I think if, people who are starting out went through a training like this, it's much easier for them to learn that way as the way you're supposed to undo, the old way. And I've been doing things like this for 20 years, and then now I have to change, kind of thing, right? Because we all know that changing is hard. But I think before we jumped online, what you said is, so beautiful about, like, we need to rethink about how we're going to reimagine, how we're going to do healthcare, right?
Absolutely. And we need to convince yourself, like in the work that you do, Angelica, imagine that you're like an expert in change and habits, etc. But you need to convince yourself that this is to your benefit, right? You need to, in this type of program, they're able to see how their perspective changed. They were able to feel a change in their emotions. We don't need to come in and tell them this is the way to practice. They can themselves. They've got the proof that there's a different and perhaps a better way of doing things.
Yeah. It's very interesting what you said now, because when I'm working with a client and I see that, perhaps they're getting frustrated because they're not getting, the changes that they want to see, I always get the question back to me, what is in me that, this is that I'm not seeing? What is in me that I am not manifesting this, but like, what is in me that I need to change and I need to do differently to help this person to change?
Right.
Because like you're saying, like when you have the perspective that the person doesn't care about their health, of course you'll be like, well, if you don't care, like I can't care for you, right? But when somebody's invested on it, then you just go like, well, let's just go together all in and create this beautiful transformation. It's an entanglement of energy and positivity and change together, isn't it? It's always like the 50-50 relationship, like the responsibility and everything. But the energy behind is, like you're saying, the perspective is really important, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like a choreographed dance where everybody knows what movements they have to do, right? They're working together. They're not working synchronously.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell us a little bit more about, for anybody that is listening, how can yagrumo help, either they, themselves as a health professional or their clinics, or, how do you guys can come in and help their team?
Listen, like I said, we're scaling. We're in the process of starting to build content. This was a concept we really wanted to nail it and to make sure that not only do we have like a good concept and a solid concept, but that we're learning and seeing ways of how we could be continuously refined. So I would say that we're certainly very open to anybody reaching out to us, to work with us, to collaborate with us. But even more importantly to me at this stage, as we're putting all of these things together, is to just look at our website, watch the videos, look at what we're proposing as a model about the pillars or the DNA of our enterprise, and send us stories. I would love to hear stories of anybody, either a healthcare worker, leadership, anybody who's in the insurance industries and whatever it may be. And everybody has a stake in healthcare, right? Everybody has different types of experiences. So I'd like to break down the silos and bring people together to share their stories, share their perspective, share the beautiful experiences that you've had, share the less beautiful experiences that you've had, the challenges that you're facing, the roadblocks that you're dealing with, and we will address them. So we might turn one of them into a story for a future program. We'll create workshops where we could work through some of these things, and I will look at each one of these emails separately and see how we could work together.
Amazing. So the objective is that once you have this content ready, let's say if you've got a clinic, they have like 5 GPs or specialists, whatever, you take them through a program as a team together or as an individual together, so they can kind of learn a different perspective and practice a different way to communicate with patients. Is that right?
So the framework is a combination of asynchronous online modules. So you have, like I said, around storytelling, you're seeing a video, you're answering questions, you're interacting, you come up with insights, etc., with Q&A periods or workshops. So the one that we delivered last year was with 5 modules and a workshop that happened partway through. So this is the model that we're looking at, is doing part of it online, independent, but creating also a sense of community. So building a community of people who could support each other, who could learn from each other, that we can mentor. And the groups that we're mostly interested in are really early healthcare professionals. So people who are early on in their careers and trainees. I'm interested in students. Obviously, we're anybody we can help, and we're trying to be laser focused here and say who stands to benefit the most and who will have the greatest impact in the long run. So students, nursing students, nurses who are starting out, medical students, residents, fellows, and early career physicians. So this is the kind of the group that we're focused on right now. Obviously, this is going to evolve with time, but for the time being, these are the groups. So we'd love to work with academic institutions. I mean, if anybody's listening to the program right now and works in education, medical education, and nursing education, I'd be delighted to be able to speak with them.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. So the program when you're talking about what you delivered last year, was that with professionals that were starting out?
So no, we tried it with a group of professionals. So this is the program that the 200 healthcare professionals who signed up for the program were nurses, pharmacists, social workers, and dietitians, primarily nurses and dietitians. And some were very new. We had nurses who had been in practice for less than 5 years. We had others who had been in practice for 25, 30 years. It was very, very
good. Yeah.
Yeah, all across the spectrum. All across the spectrum.
And I think, like you said, it's something when it comes to communication, we all learn from each other, right? It's not that it's not like a 1 + 1 is 2, but it's something that everybody can learn from the storytelling and from the experiences that they can share with each other.
It's so important to observe. I think there's nothing more important to observe, to be able to converse with other people, to share your experiences, share what works, but also to have like a really keen sense of observation. Look around, see what works for other people, see who's a master communicator, who relate to their patients, who do patients look up to, and model that behavior. There's so much to be learned from observation.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So right now, if anybody wants to reach out to you, like you're saying, to share their own experience, which was either positive or not so positive, they can reach out through. I've got already the link. Yeah.
yagrumo.ca. So reach out, tell us your stories. We'd love to be able to feature stories. I mean, we're writing scripts. And tell us if you're currently facing a challenge as a patient, as a healthcare provider. Tell us about the challenge that you're facing. We'll see how we can address it in either the content, the experiences that we're building, or one-on-one. I may reach out to you or have my team reach out to you so that we could move the conversation forward.
Amazing. I definitely have a story for you. We can share that. I know. I've got so I don't know where to start.
Yeah, you don't know where to start.
You're gonna have to do a intensive course for the oncologists. That's all I can say. But
we're not like, we can only speak for ourselves, right? Sometimes how are we to the way that we behave, and not just in healthcare, but in life in general. It takes a lot for us to step back and become self-aware of certain behaviors that are interpreted so differently by others.
Yeah. And I would like to say that I did mention the oncologists, but I have an enormous amount of respect, and I'm very grateful for everything that they did for me. But they could benefit with some training around communication. But I am very grateful for what they've done for me as well. And I think, like I said, like as long as we keep ourselves open to learning and to observing and to evolving, I think that's what life is about, like in work, at work, and outside and everywhere, right?
Growth is like the greatest source of happiness, right? And there's a place for humility in healthcare.
Yeah.
It's really going to be very humble to know that there's much more that we don't know than we know, and to always be open to new experiences and new learning. So critical in healthcare, in life.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Irith, for sharing with us. This is amazing, all your learnings and your yagrumo mission, and I am sure it's going to make a massive impact all around the world. I can see you going around the world, maybe not in the 𝗷𝗚𝗧𝗏 because you need a team with you, but it's amazing, like what you're doing. I think it's very, very important. As a patient, I really feel there is a need for that, and I think that we need to really focus on that for the future, because I think that could be a deal breaker for people to actually either change it or not.
Sure.
And I think that's where you could definitely help people to be taken on a different journey.
I want them to experience the joy that I experienced. I just want them to really be able to fill themselves up, to understand how potent this relationship is.
Yeah, and that is so beautiful that you said it, because sometimes, like I would ask the oncologist, why did you choose oncologist and oncology? And they'll be like, oh, because I wanted to help people. And I think, like, I always thought to myself, how fulfilled are they really to be literally just, sending people to have chemotherapy and not being able to understand, their full story and empower them to make some changes that could prevent them from maybe having a cancer recurrence, or, like, just so they can not just turn up to chemo, but just to change things around. So I think that would bring a lot more and I think that's beautiful that you said that if, we're all fueled by some sort of something that motivates us, like, and I think that, what you said is beautiful, because what you feel when you are with your patient and you're empowering them and you have this connection and you are making and seeing that they are changing, there is nothing that can compare to that feeling, right?
No,
Yeah.
Nothing. It really is an incredible sense of, it brings meaning to the work that we do. And interestingly enough, before we end, I just want to say one thing to you, Angelica, is that it's known, the research has shown, the patient-provider relationship, the relationship that we have with our patients, is the most powerful determinant of physician satisfaction.
Wow.
So think about it. The most powerful, what determines how satisfied we are with their work is the quality of the relationship that we have with our patients, and yet we're not focusing on it. We're not focusing on it. So to me, this might be kind of an antidote to burnout to some extent, and I understand that burnout is complex. It's a very complex theme, but we've approached it from so many different angles, and I truly believe this serves an important antidote.
Yeah, and not only burnout, but depression and anxiety. It's also rampant in healthcare professionals. So all of that is linked to some. Of course, there is a big part of it. If you're not fulfilled, if you feel that whatever you're doing, it's not filling your cup mentally, emotionally as well. It's very hard for you to get up in the morning every day and thinking, I love what I'm doing. I want to make a difference. And in your story, you could see that what motivated you to get up for 5 years when everything was not going well, it was your patience. That's how powerful that can be, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really, really value your time and your teachings and everything. And I will leave your socials and websites below so people can get in touch. And hopefully you're going to get lots of stories so you can keep expanding the yagrumo's mission.
Thank you. My very first podcast, you told me I shouldn't be freaked out. You did a great job. I like to be watched while I'm talking to people. You mastered this. Thank you, Angelica. This was a really nice experience for me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I did say it is my superpower to interview people. So
clearly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Arif, and I will speak to you very soon.
Thank you.